Some buildings don't look like they were made to serve their purpose. They look like they were made in the middle of a wild idea, a bet, or after one drink too many. Walls curve like they're melting, windows tilt like they're trying to escape, and rooftops defy logic or gravity. You walk past them and wonder, was this genius at work or total chaos? But this isn't just about strange shapes or flashy facades. It's about the stories these structures tell, the accidents that turned into legends, and the decisions, good and bad, that made them stand out. Today, we're taking you on a tour of the piano-shaped palace, parking garages dressed like libraries, hotels that double as death rays, and more. Because if buildings could talk, some of these would slur their words. In the Polish seaside town of Sopot, a building sits on a busy pedestrian street that looks as if it has started to melt in the sun. The walls ripple, the roof sags, and the windows tilt in different directions. People stop to stare, take photos, and sometimes step closer to check if their eyes are playing tricks on them. This is the Crooked House, or Krzywy Domek in Polish. It is not the result of a construction error or damage from an earthquake. It was designed to look this way from the start. The idea for the Crooked House came from the illustrations of John Marcin Schanzer and Per Dahlberg, artists known in Poland for their surreal and playful drawings in children's books. Schanzer's work often featured whimsical buildings with exaggerated proportions, tilted roofs, and strange curves. Dahlberg's illustrations shared the same dreamlike quality. The architects, Szatiński and Zaleski, wanted to bring that kind of drawing into the real world. They studied the lines in the artwork and tried to imagine how those shapes would work in 3 dimensions. The result was a structure that looks like it has been softened and bent, with not a straight line in sight. The design process was unusual because it began with a mood rather than a set of functional requirements. Many buildings start with a list of needs. How many floors? How much space? What materials? The Crooked House started with the question, what if a fairy tale illustration was real? That idea guided every choice. The façade undulates like fabric caught in a breeze. The roof tiles are arranged to look uneven, almost like scales on a dragon's back. The windows are framed by curves that make them seem to lean in or out, and even the doors are set into arcs rather than rectangles. Inside, the structure is more conventional, with straight floors and walls to meet building codes, but the outer shell keeps the illusion intact. When it opened in 2004, the Crooked House quickly became one of the most photographed buildings in Poland. Tourists sought it out, often after seeing it in guidebooks or online photo collections of strange architecture. Locals had mixed feelings. Some appreciated the way it broke up the otherwise traditional street, adding a sense of play to the area. Others found it distracting or even irritating, like a joke that wears thin over time. The building sits along Monte Cassino Street, a popular promenade lined with shops, cafes, and restaurants, so it is hard to ignore. Some visitors linger to admire the details, while others shake their heads and walk on. One thing most people agree on is that the Crooked House draws attention. The warped walls and sloping roof make it stand out even in a crowded photograph. It does not blend into the background. For a city like Sopot, which depends on tourism, that visibility is valuable. The Crooked House has become a meeting point and a reference marker. People arrange to meet by the crooked windows or in front of the building that looks drunk. Its presence in the center of town means it appears in countless holiday snapshots and social media posts, often tagged with the city's name. From an architectural perspective, the Crooked House is an example of form leading function. The building houses shops, offices, and a cafe, but those uses are secondary to the visual impact. In most commercial developments, the exterior is designed to support the tenant's needs or to reflect a certain brand identity. Here, the exterior is the main attraction, and the businesses inside benefit from the foot traffic it creates. The shape of the building may not improve efficiency or comfort, but it ensures that people come inside, if only to see what the interior feels like after looking at the outside. Standing in front of the Crooked House, you might feel a slight sense of imbalance. The ground is flat, but the lines of the building suggest movement, as if it could sag further or lean to one side at any moment. This plays with the brain's ability to process straight and level lines. In most urban spaces, our eyes expect vertical walls and horizontal roofs. Here, those expectations are challenged, and the result can be both amusing and disorienting. A simple example of this effect can be found in fun houses at fairs, where tilted rooms cause you to step carefully even though the floor is solid. The crooked house uses a similar visual trick, but in a permanent, functional building. Over the years, the building has become part of Sopot's identity. It appears on postcards and in tourist brochures. Guides mention it in walking tours. It has been included in lists of the world's strangest buildings, alongside structures like the Dancing House in Prague and the upside-down houses found in some European theme parks. For residents, it is something to point out when friends or relatives visit. It might not represent the history of the town in the way that older buildings do, but it adds to the mix of experiences that Sopot offers. The crooked house is not universally loved. Some architects and critics dismiss it as gimmicky or unserious. They argue that good architecture should serve both aesthetic and functional purposes, and that visual novelty should not come at the expense of practicality. Supporters counter that the building works because it brings joy, sparks curiosity, and encourages people to look more closely at their surroundings. In a street of conventional structures, a single oddity can make the entire area feel more dynamic. When viewed in the context of its inspiration, the crooked house fits into a tradition of translating art into architecture. Other examples include buildings that mimic natural forms, like the Lotus Temple in India, or that echo specific works of art, like the Hundertwasser House in Vienna. In each case, the architect starts with an image or a style and adapts it to the constraints of construction. The crooked house follows this path, but with the added challenge of recreating the fluid, imprecise lines of hand-drawn illustrations in solid materials like brick, plaster, and glass. Even with modern construction techniques, building something that looks intentionally distorted requires careful planning. The architects had to make sure that the irregular surfaces would shed rain, resist wind, and hold up over time. The structural frame needed to support the weight without relying on the visual cues of straight columns or beams. Achieving that balance between illusion and stability is part of what makes the building noteworthy, even for those who do not like its appearance. In the city of Huainan in China's Anhui province, there is a building shaped like a grand piano with a giant glass violin leaning against its side. The black piano forms the main structure, and the transparent violin acts as an entrance hall. From a distance, it looks as though two oversized musical instruments have been set down in the middle of an open plaza. This is the piano house, and it was built with a clear purpose in mind: to attract attention to a part of the city that was still being developed. The building was completed in 2007, during a period when Huainan officials wanted to create landmarks that could help promote the area and draw in visitors. Large cities often use signature architecture to create a sense of identity and encourage tourism, and smaller cities have followed the same approach. In Huainan's case, the piano house was meant to be a visual anchor for a new district, a place that could appear in promotional materials and convince people that the area had something unique to offer. The local government hoped that an unusual building would give the district a recognizable image and help boost investment and visitor numbers. The design team included architecture students from the Hefei University of Technology, working in partnership with city planners. They chose the piano and violin theme as a nod to Huainan's cultural ambitions. The piano itself houses spaces for exhibitions and events, while the violin contains the staircase and elevator that lead into the main building. The combination of the two instruments was meant to symbolize harmony and creativity, with the glass violin providing a light, transparent contrast to the solid, dark form of the piano. When you approach the building, the scale becomes clear. The piano is several stories high, with the curved lid forming a canopy over part of the open plaza. The violin's transparent panels are made from tinted glass, giving the impression of delicate strings and an elegant outline. Even the details are considered. The piano has large black keys and white keys represented along one edge, though they are not functional. The architects designed it so that the overall silhouette would be instantly recognizable, even from a photograph, taken at a distance. From a practical point of view, the piano house is less about day-to-day functionality and more about visual impact. Inside, the spaces are conventional in shape, with flat floors and rectangular rooms hidden within the curved shell. This allows the building to meet safety standards and provide usable interior layouts, but it also means that the exterior form dictates the internal arrangement. The exhibition halls follow the footprint of the piano's body, which results in irregular corners and walls that do not align with typical furniture layouts. This can make setting up events or displays more challenging, but it is a trade-off the designers accepted for the sake of the building's appearance. The choice to focus on spectacle rather than efficiency is not unusual in landmark architecture. Many cities have structures whose main function is to be seen and remembered rather than to provide optimal working or living space. The Sydney Opera House, for example, is celebrated for its sail-like forms, even though the interior spaces had to be adapted after construction to suit performance needs. The piano house fits into this same pattern. It is a statement piece that helps define a location in the public imagination. For visitors, the building works best as an outdoor experience. Standing in front of it, you can see the curved lid of the piano, the glossy black panels reflecting the surroundings, and the violin's glass body catching the light. It is a building designed to be photographed. This quality is part of why it became a social media attraction in the years after it was built. Pictures of the piano house began appearing on travel blogs, in online lists of strange or beautiful buildings, and on platforms like Instagram and Weibo. The shape is so literal and unexpected that it often surprises people who see it for the first time. Once an image like this begins to circulate online, it can take on a life of its own. People may not know where Huainan is or why the building was constructed, but they remember the picture of a giant piano with a violin beside it. Some travelers make a point of visiting so they can take their own photos. Others use it as a background for wedding pictures or music-related events. The building's unusual form lends itself to themed photo shoots, and this secondary use has helped keep it in public view. However, the same factors that make the piano house a good visual landmark also limit its flexibility. Its form makes it difficult to repurpose without undermining the design's intent. A building shaped like a piano cannot be disguised or adapted into a neutral background. This can be a challenge for long-term planning, especially if the original purpose no longer suits the needs of the district. For now, though, it continues to serve as an exhibition space and as a symbol for the area. The piano house is often discussed alongside other examples of literal architecture, where a building is shaped like the object it represents. These range from novelty roadside attractions, such as coffee pot-shaped diners or shoe-shaped houses, to large civic projects with thematic designs. The risk with this approach is that it can be dismissed as superficial or lacking depth, but the reward is immediate recognition. In Huainan, that recognition was the goal from the beginning. The decision to use a glass violin for the entrance has a symbolic dimension as well. In musical terms, the piano and violin are often paired for duets, and the combination can represent cooperation between different voices or styles. In architectural terms, the solid piano and the transparent violin provide a contrast in materials and mass. The glass creates a sense of openness and lets natural light into the entrance hall, while the piano's darker body creates a more enclosed interior for exhibitions. This pairing of forms and materials reinforces the building's central metaphor. Standing in the plaza outside, you can see how the piano house dominates the surrounding space. There are no other structures nearby that compete with its height or distinctive outline. The effect is deliberate. The building acts as a visual anchor for the entire area, drawing the eye from a distance and serving as a point of orientation. Even without signs, visitors can tell where they are in relation to the piano's curved lid and the violin's tall, narrow frame. The piano house may not be universally praised, but it has achieved what it set out to do. It has given Huainan a recognizable image, brought visitors to the area, and provided a subject for countless photographs. For better or worse, it is difficult to forget once you have seen it, and in the realm of city branding, that can be as valuable as any practical feature. In downtown Kansas City, Missouri, a parking garage does not look like a parking garage at all. From the street, it appears to be a giant bookshelf, each spine several meters tall, lined up side by side. These oversized book spines form the facade of the Kansas City Public Library's parking structure, turning what could have been an anonymous concrete block into a striking public landmark. The design came from a community-driven process that involved residents in shaping how their city would present itself. The Kansas City Public Library wanted a parking facility near its central branch to serve visitors, staff, and people attending events. A plain structure would have been cheaper and easier to build, but the library's leadership saw an opportunity to connect the new garage to the institution's cultural role. They asked the public to help decide how the building should look. Residents were invited to suggest titles for the giant book spines, and the library collected hundreds of responses. The final selection reflected a balance between literary classics, popular works, and titles with ties to local history. Each chosen book was recreated at a massive scale, with realistic colors, fonts, and decorative details matching known editions. The symbolism behind the giant spines is layered. On one level, they literally represent the library's mission: books as a source of knowledge, imagination, and civic life. On another level, they act as a visual statement about the value Kansas City places on literature and culture. The titles chosen, ranging from The Lord of the Rings to Kill a Mockingbird to Catch-22, cover different genres, eras, and voices. They show the library as a place that embraces diversity in reading and thought. Some titles have a direct connection to the region, anchoring the display in local identity. For example, works by authors from Missouri and Kansas sit alongside global classics, signaling that the city's culture is both rooted and outward-looking. There is also an element of irony in the project. Behind those towering book spines is not a vast reading room or a hidden archive, but a parking garage. The functional core of the building is about as far from the quiet, contemplative world of books as possible. Instead of shelves lined with paper, there are rows of cars. Instead of the rustle of pages, there is the hum of engines. The facade acts as a mask, transforming the utilitarian reality into something aligned with the library's public image. This juxtaposition creates a visual joke that most visitors understand immediately. It says that even a parking structure can be part of a city's storytelling if the design is intentional. From an architectural point of view, the facade is a form of applied ornamentation. It does not carry structural loads. It is a screen attached to the exterior of the garage. Each book is made from signboard material over a steel framework, designed to withstand weather and retain vivid colors over time. The scale exaggerates the proportions of real books, giving the whole wall a sense of playful grandeur. In daylight, the spines are bold and clear, and at night, lighting along the base keeps them visible. For people walking or driving past, the image is immediately legible. There is no need to explain what the shapes represent. The public reception to the design was strong from the start. Local media covered the unveiling, and photos of the garage spread beyond Kansas City through architecture websites and tourism blogs. For residents, the bookshelf facade became a source of civic pride, proof that the city could take a mundane necessity and turn it into something memorable. The titles themselves became a point of conversation. People debated which books should have been included, which were essential, and which felt like odd choices. This kind of engagement reinforced the idea that the garage was not just infrastructure, but also a community project. Tourists often stopped to photograph the facade, sometimes without even going inside the library. The visual appeal works well for social media, where a single image can convey the entire concept. Travel guides list the bookshelf as one of Kansas City's quirkiest sights, and it often appears alongside more traditional attractions like the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art or Union Station. This helps the city project a cultural image that is accessible and a little unexpected. The success of the bookshelf garage fits into a broader trend of using design to humanize urban infrastructure. Parking garages are usually considered dead space in a city's visual landscape, necessary for function but undesirable in appearance. By giving the garage a distinct identity, the library turned it into an asset rather than a visual burden. Other cities have experimented with similar approaches, from murals to green walls, but the Kansas City example stands out because of its direct link to the building's institutional purpose. The titles on the spines also serve as an invitation. Someone walking past might be reminded of a favorite novel or become curious about a book they have never read. In this way, the facade does more than decorate. It subtly promotes reading and reinforces the library's role. For example, a passerby who notices Fahrenheit 451 might think about its themes of censorship and the preservation of knowledge, ideas directly relevant to the mission of a public library. The design uses visual recognition as a form of soft advocacy. The bookshelf also works as a geographic marker. In giving directions downtown, people will say, "It's near the big books," and everyone knows the location. This kind of informal navigation aids in making the space feel familiar and distinctive. It helps integrate the library and its garage into the mental map residents use for their city. There are practical limits to the design's impact. The facade does not solve any of the broader challenges of parking in urban areas, nor does it change the fact that the structure is primarily for cars. But it does shift how people experience that space. It turns an encounter with a parking garage into a moment of recognition, even amusement. That moment may be brief, but in the flow of city life, small points of connection can add up to a more engaging public realm. By letting the community choose the titles, the library ensured that the design had a genuine connection to local tastes and values. This is not a generic bookshelf pulled from stock images, but one that reflects specific cultural references important to the people who live there. That process of selection and the public debate that followed became part of the project's story, which in turn strengthened its place in the city's identity. When the Vdara Hotel opened on the Las Vegas Strip in 2009, it was meant to be a sleek, modern tower with a curved glass facade that reflected the desert sky. The building's sweeping arc gave it a distinct profile and fit the high-end image of the city center complex. The design by architect Raphael Vignoli was visually striking, but soon after opening, guests and staff noticed an unexpected and dangerous side effect. The way the glass panels curved and reflected sunlight created an intense beam of focused heat on certain spots by the hotel's pool deck. The phenomenon occurred because the concave shape of the tower acted like a giant mirror. In physics, when light reflects off a curved surface, it can converge at a focal point, increasing the intensity of the light and heat in that spot. The Vdara's south-facing glass caught the strong Nevada sun and concentrated it into a moving patch of superheated air. Depending on the time of day and season, this beam would travel across the pool deck like a slow spotlight. The temperature in its path could become high enough to cause discomfort or even injury. Guests described the sensation as suddenly stepping into an oven. Reports began to circulate of plastic cups melting, poolside bags becoming hot to the touch, and in some cases, hair or skin feeling singed. One guest compared it to using a magnifying glass to burn paper. Others called it a death ray, a term that quickly spread through news outlets and online discussions. The phrase was dramatic, but it captured the public imagination and made the problem impossible for the hotel to ignore. The real-world consequences were not limited to discomfort. Some guests said they experienced minor burns or red marks on exposed skin after sitting in the affected areas. Staff had to move pool chairs and umbrellas throughout the day to keep people out of the beam's path. The reflective heat also damaged property. A plastic drink cup left in the wrong place could warp within minutes. There were accounts of laminated signs peeling and synthetic fabrics becoming brittle. In a city known for its relentless sun, even seasoned Las Vegas visitors found the concentrated heat unusual. Public backlash followed quickly. News coverage framed the story as an example of design gone wrong, and the death ray nickname stuck. For a luxury hotel competing in a crowded market, that kind of attention was damaging. The problem also raised legal questions. If a guest suffered burns, even minor ones, the hotel could face liability claims. In the United States, property owners have a duty to maintain safe conditions for visitors. A recurring hazard caused by the building's own design put Vdara in a vulnerable position. The hotel's management responded by trying to mitigate the problem. One solution was to install a special film over the most reflective sections of glass to diffuse the sunlight and reduce the intensity of the beam. The idea was similar to using anti-glare coatings on windows, but on a much larger scale. They also adjusted the layout of the pool area, adding more umbrellas and shaded zones to give guests safer seating options. These measures reduced but did not completely eliminate the problem, because the basic geometry of the building remained the same. The sun's position changes throughout the year, and the focal point of the reflection shifts, making it hard to predict exactly where the beam will land on any given day. The incident became a case study in architectural and engineering circles. It illustrated how a building's form can interact with its environment in ways that are not always fully accounted for in the design phase. Computer modeling can predict sunlight paths and reflection patterns, but in some cases, simulations fail to capture the complexity of real-world conditions. The Vdara problem was similar to an earlier issue in London, where another Vignoli-designed building, 20 Fenchurch Street, known as the Walkie Talkie, produced a concentrated glare that melted parts of a parked car. Both cases involved concave surfaces and intense sunlight. In design terms, the problem is related to solar convergence. Architects and engineers working in sunny climates often take steps to break up reflective surfaces or alter their angles to avoid creating focal points. Louvers, matte finishes, and irregular facades can help scatter light instead of concentrating it. The Vdara case showed what can happen when these considerations are secondary to visual impact. The curved facade was aesthetically appealing and gave the hotel a sense of motion, but its interaction with the sun created an unintended hazard. The lesson for the industry was clear. Modeling sunlight behavior is as important as modeling wind loads or structural stability, especially for glass-heavy buildings in bright climates. The cost of retrofitting solutions after construction can be significant, and reputational damage can be lasting. In the Vdara's case, the hotel eventually moved past the death ray headlines, but the episode remains a memorable example of how form and function can collide in unexpected ways. For guests who experienced it, the heat beam was a surreal moment in an otherwise typical pool day. One minute they were lounging comfortably, and the next they were scrambling to move their chair out of an invisible line of fire. In a city full of man-made spectacles, the Vdara's concentrated sunlight stood out not as an intentional attraction, but as a reminder that the desert sun, combined with the wrong geometry, can turn architecture into something far more dangerous than planned. 20 Fenchurch Street in London, more commonly known as the Walkie Talkie Building, was designed to be a distinctive addition to the city's skyline. Architect Raphael Vignoli envisioned a structure that would widen toward the top, giving it a top-heavy shape unlike the slender towers nearby. The curved facade and flared upper floors were intended to maximize rentable space at higher levels, where the views are better and more valuable. The building's distinctive form made it stand out immediately, but the reality of how it interacted with its environment turned it into a cautionary tale. Soon after completion in 2014, people began to notice an unusual effect in the streets below. The concave glass facade on the south side acted like a massive mirror, concentrating sunlight onto a small area of Eastcheap, a street at the base of the tower. For a few hours on sunny days, the reflected beam created enough heat to cause visible damage. The most widely reported incident involved a Jaguar car parked in the beam's path. The reflection melted parts of its bodywork, including trim and side mirrors. Other stories described tiles cracking, paint blistering, and even the smell of burning from shop fronts caught in the concentrated glare. The press quickly picked up the story, and the building gained the nickname Walkie Scorchy. The phrase spread through headlines, social media, and television coverage, making the problem a matter of public ridicule as much as technical failure. Photographs of warped car parts and people holding fried eggs in the beam's path reinforced the image of a building that was not just flawed but absurd. In a city where new skyscrapers often face resistance for changing the historic skyline, this kind of publicity fed criticism from those who already disliked the tower's bulk and shape. Vignoli acknowledged that the problem was similar to what had happened with the Vdara Hotel in Las Vegas, another of his designs, though he noted that London's angle of sunlight and seasonal patterns made the situation more limited in duration. Still, for the hours when conditions were right, the effect was intense enough to require immediate action. Temporary solutions included installing shading at street level and restricting parking in the affected zone. Engineers studied the building's geometry to determine how best to diffuse or block the concentrated light. The permanent fix involved adding horizontal aluminum fins, known as brise soleil, to the façade to disrupt the reflection and scatter the sunlight. This reduced the intensity of the beam and eliminated the heat damage, but the incident left a lasting impression on the public. The walkie-scorchy name stuck in casual conversation, and the building's reputation never fully escaped the shadow of the mishap. Even after the technical problem was resolved, the tower remained a frequent subject in lists of architectural blunders or controversial designs. Public ridicule went beyond the sun glare problem. The building's unusual widening toward the top drew comparisons to a pint glass, a hairdryer, and other bulky household objects. Critics said its scale overwhelmed the surrounding streets and disrupted the balance of the skyline when viewed from the Thames or from protected sightlines toward St. Paul's Cathedral. In London, where building heights and forms are often debated with reference to heritage views, the walkie-talkie became a touchpoint for arguments about how far modern architecture should push against tradition. Inside, the building contains offices and, at the very top, the Sky Garden, a public space with gardens, restaurants, and observation decks. The Sky Garden was part of the planning agreement that allowed the building to be approved, offering public access in exchange for its height and scale. While the views from the top are widely praised, some visitors note that the space feels more like a commercial venue than a genuine public garden. This has added to the perception that the building is more about image than public benefit. The controversy over the walkie-talkie influenced later debates about other tall buildings in London. Planning committees, architects, and engineers cited the case when discussing how to model environmental impacts, including wind, light, and temperature effects on the surrounding streets. The building became an example in architecture and engineering courses, showing how the interplay of form, material, and sun path can create unintended consequences. For those who work or live near 20 Fenchurch Street, the glare incident has become part of local lore. Shopkeepers on Eastcheap still recall the days when the sunbeam would creep across the pavement, heating metal signs and door handles to uncomfortable levels. Even though the problem has been solved, the story is retold to visitors and newcomers, often with a mix of amusement and exasperation. It stands as a reminder that in a dense urban environment, the shape of a single building can have surprising and sometimes hazardous effects on the spaces around it. The walkie-talkie's presence on the skyline remains divisive. Some appreciate its bold departure from the more tapered towers of the financial district, while others see it as a symbol of overdevelopment and disregard for the city's historic character. The sun glare incident only amplified those opinions, giving critics a concrete example to point to when arguing against similar projects. In this way, the building's legacy is tied not only to its unusual form, but also to the lessons it forced architects and planners to learn about the real-world consequences of ambitious designs. In 1987, the North Korean government began building what was planned to be the tallest hotel in the world. The Ryugyong Hotel, named after a historic name for Pyongyang, was designed to rise 105 stories and stand 330 meters tall. The project was not simply about providing luxury accommodation. It was a political statement. North Korea wanted to showcase its technological and architectural capabilities, and the timing was deliberate. A year earlier, South Korea had completed the Westin Stamford Hotel in Singapore, which at that time was one of the tallest hotels in the world. North Korea's leadership saw the Ryugyong as a way to outdo its rival and demonstrate national pride on a global stage. The building's triangular pyramid shape was unusual for a skyscraper. The design featured 3 wings tapering to a sharp point, meeting at a central core. This shape gave it a futuristic look, and in official statements, it was described as a symbol of the nation's bright future. However, the country's economic situation began to deteriorate even as construction moved forward. The collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s cut off a major source of trade and aid. By 1992, with the concrete shell nearly complete but no windows, interior work, or functional systems in place, construction stopped entirely. For more than a decade, the unfinished structure loomed over Pyongyang's skyline. The bare concrete pyramid was impossible to ignore. It was visible from many parts of the city, yet it remained sealed off and unused. Western media began to refer to it as the Hotel of Doom, a nickname that stuck. Satellite images showed the gray, hollow frame, and stories circulated about poor construction quality and structural issues. While there is no public record of serious structural faults, the long halt in work allowed speculation to grow. In a country that tightly controls its image, the Ryugyong became an odd exception, a monumental project that stood as a reminder of overreach and stalled ambition. For ordinary North Koreans, the hotel was largely absent from public discussion. State media avoided mentioning it, and foreign visitors were not allowed close to it. Photographs taken from a distance by tourists or journalists often became symbols of the country's isolation and economic hardship. In global architecture circles, the Ryugyong appeared on lists of abandoned megastructures and failed projects. Its sheer size and incomplete state made it one of the most famous unfinished buildings in the world. In 2008, work unexpectedly resumed. The Erascom Group, an Egyptian telecommunications company involved in building North Korea's mobile network, began installing a glass facade on the structure. This was part of a broader agreement with the government, and it gave the exterior a completely new appearance. The bare concrete was covered with reflective glass panels, transforming the building's look from derelict to sleek. The new facade was completed by 2011, and in 2012, the hotel's image was even featured in state propaganda films, suggesting that it might soon open. Despite the change in appearance, the building remained empty. Reports indicated that the interior was still incomplete, lacking the infrastructure needed to operate a functioning hotel. Various announcements of partial openings circulated over the next few years. In 2018, the German luxury hotel group Kempinski was briefly linked to a possible opening, but the deal never materialized. Later, LED lighting was added to the exterior, allowing the building to display large animated patterns and national symbols at night. This lighting display became a regular feature during national celebrations, reframing the building as an active part of Pyongyang's cityscape, even if it was still not in use. The effort to rehabilitate the Ryugyong's image relied on these visible changes. For people inside North Korea, the glass facade and light shows suggested progress. For observers abroad, the cosmetic upgrades raised questions about whether the building might eventually open, at least in part. Official statements remained vague, and no concrete details about the hotel's interior were released. As of recent years, there is no confirmed evidence of regular use, and the building's interior condition remains unknown to outsiders. The Ryugyong's long history reflects the intersection of architecture and politics in a highly controlled state. Its construction was driven by rivalry and prestige, its abandonment by economic crisis, and its revival attempts by the need to project modernity. The fact that the building's public role has shifted from a silent embarrassment to a lit-up symbol shows how a structure can be reinterpreted without changing its fundamental function. Even without guests, the hotel's towering presence continues to dominate the skyline of Pyongyang, a reminder of both ambition and limitation. Denver International Airport opened in 1995 on a vast stretch of plains east of the city. At 53 square miles, it is the largest airport in the United States by land area, and its most distinctive feature is the roof of the main terminal. The white, peaked structure is made of a Teflon-coated fiberglass material stretched over a steel frame. The roof's shape resembles a series of snow-covered mountains, a reference to the nearby Rocky Mountains, and allows natural light to filter into the terminal during the day. The design was meant to connect the airport's identity to its location and to give travelers an immediate visual impression that they were in Colorado. The size of the airport and its unusual roof were the result of a long planning process. Denver officials decided to replace the city's older Stapleton Airport, which was smaller and surrounded by development. The new location allowed for future expansion, longer runways, and fewer noise restrictions. The terminal's roof was designed to be both symbolic and functional, providing shelter while reducing the weight and cost of a traditional solid roof structure. The openness of the interior, created by the tent-like design, was intended to make the passenger experience less confined and more welcoming. Soon after the airport opened, rumors and conspiracy theories began to circulate. Some were triggered by the artwork displayed in the terminal. A series of large murals by artist Leo Tanguma depicted themes of peace, environmentalism, and human cooperation, but the vivid and sometimes unsettling imagery led some viewers to interpret them in darker ways. Online forums and amateur researchers claimed the murals contained coded messages about war, death, or future global events. Others pointed to the unusual symbols and markings on the airport's floors and walls, suggesting connections to secret societies like the Freemasons or the Illuminati. One of the most persistent theories is that the airport sits on top of a massive underground bunker or network of tunnels intended for use by the government or global elites in the event of a disaster. This idea gained traction because the airport does have extensive underground areas, including baggage tunnels and service routes, and because construction delays and budget overruns during the building process were widely reported. The cost of the airport exceeded initial estimates by billions of dollars, which conspiracy theorists cited as evidence of hidden projects. The theories expanded over time, incorporating claims that the runways were laid out in the shape of a swastika, that the airport's distance from the city was intentional to isolate it for secret purposes, and that the giant blue horse sculpture outside the terminal, officially named Blue Mustang, was a symbol of something sinister. The statue, with glowing red eyes, gained its own notoriety after a section of it fell on its creator during construction, causing his death. This incident added to the air of mystery and unease for some visitors. In reality, the airport's design and construction can be explained without resorting to hidden agendas. The roof shape is a structural and aesthetic choice, the underground spaces are for operational purposes, and the murals were commissioned as public art with clear stated themes. However, the persistence of the conspiracy theories shows how easily unusual architecture and public art can be reinterpreted when seen through a speculative lens. The airport's vast size, remote location, and unconventional features all feed into the sense that there could be more to it than meets the eye. The fascination with these stories has had an unexpected effect. Denver International Airport has leaned into the rumors in its marketing, using them as a way to engage the public. Signs and advertisements inside the terminal joke about the secret bunkers and lizard people supposedly living beneath the airport. By acknowledging the conspiracy theories in a tongue-in-cheek way, the airport has turned them into part of its public identity. This approach keeps the conversation light while benefiting from the attention that the rumors generate. The relationship between public fascination and architectural intent at Denver International is a good example of how meaning can shift after a project is complete. The architects aimed to create a functional, symbolic, and welcoming space that reflected Colorado's landscape. Passengers passing through can appreciate the bright open terminal and the ease of navigating large spaces. At the same time, others fixate on the perceived hidden messages and alleged secret functions. Both interpretations coexist, and in some ways they reinforce each other. The airport's visual distinctiveness makes it memorable, and its memorability makes it an easy target for imaginative theories. From a design perspective, the airport's story shows that mystery, whether intentional or accidental, can greatly influence how a building is perceived. Even without actual secrets, the presence of unusual features, unexplained details, or symbolic art can encourage speculation. When a building is as large and visible as Denver International, those stories can spread far beyond the local area. In this case, the conspiracy theories have become part of the airport's cultural footprint, ensuring it is discussed and remembered in ways that go beyond its original purpose as a transportation hub. In the late 1970s, on the northern coast of Taiwan, in the Sanji district, a strange cluster of buildings began to rise. They looked nothing like traditional Taiwanese homes. Each unit was a rounded pod, elevated on short supports, with large windows wrapping around its curved walls. The shapes were reminiscent of flying saucers from mid-century science fiction films, which is how the development earned the nickname UFO houses. The project was intended to be a modern holiday resort for wealthy buyers, offering a seaside escape in a futuristic setting. The vision fit with a global wave of experimental housing from that era. Architects in several countries were exploring modular and prefabricated structures, often using fiberglass and plastics to create smooth, curved forms. The UFO houses followed this trend, using prefabricated segments that could be assembled quickly on site. The interiors were designed to make use of the panoramic views of the ocean, with open-plan layouts and minimal interior walls. The elevated form kept the main living spaces above ground level, protecting against coastal flooding and allowing for parking or storage underneath. Despite the ambition, the development never reached completion. Work began in 1978, but by the early 1980s, construction had stopped entirely. Several reasons have been suggested for the project's failure. The most widely cited is financial trouble. The developer faced rising costs, and the target market of affluent buyers was smaller than expected. Taiwan was experiencing rapid economic change, but luxury leisure properties were still a risky investment, especially in a location that was not yet a well-established tourist destination. There were also persistent rumors of accidents during construction. Local stories claimed that fatal incidents occurred on site, sometimes linked to the transportation or installation of the large prefabricated sections. These accounts were never confirmed by official records, but they fed a sense of unease about the project. Another factor often mentioned in local folklore was the presence of a burial ground or shrine in the area before construction began. In these stories, disturbing the site was said to have brought bad luck. While such claims have no documented evidence, they added a layer of superstition to the practical, economic, and logistical problems. Once work stopped, the unfinished pods remained in place for decades. Some were complete on the outside but empty inside. Others lacked windows or had been left with exposed structural joints. Over time, weather and vandalism took their toll. The fiberglass shells faded and cracked, and the interiors were stripped of any fixtures. Graffiti appeared, and windows were broken. Despite the decay, the site became a magnet for urban explorers, photographers, and curious locals. The unusual shapes and the eeriness of an abandoned resort created a setting that felt more like a film set than a real place. By the 1990s, the UFO houses had taken on a life of their own in public imagination. They appeared in travel articles and on television as one of Taiwan's strangest abandoned sites. People invented stories about their origin and fate, often blending fact with fiction. Some said the project had been a secret military installation disguised as a resort. Others imagined it as an alien-themed park that failed to open. The lack of official explanation meant that speculation filled the gap, and each new telling added to the legend. This transformation from failed development to urban myth shows how architecture can acquire meaning unrelated to its original intent. The UFO houses were designed to be symbols of modern luxury, but their abandonment turned them into symbols of mystery and loss. For younger people growing up nearby, they were a backdrop to ghost stories and dares. Visitors would climb into the shells, take photos framed by the curved windows, or explore the crumbling staircases and empty rooms. By the early 2000s, safety concerns became more serious. The structures were deteriorating, and parts of the site had become unstable. The local government eventually decided to demolish the UFO houses in 2008. Before demolition began, photographers documented the site extensively, knowing it would soon disappear. These images spread widely online, cementing the visual memory of the pods even after they were gone. Looking back, the UFO houses highlight the fine line between being ahead of one's time and being doomed from the start. The futuristic design might have found more success in a different context, closer to a major city during a period of stronger demand for resort housing, or with a phased development plan that could adjust to market changes. In the late 1970s, however, the combination of experimental architecture, high cost, and an uncertain customer base proved too much. The site's failure also shows how experimental architecture carries unique risks. When a project's appeal depends heavily on novelty, any disruption, financial, logistical, or cultural, can leave it stranded. Conventional designs may be easier to repurpose if a development stalls, but a field of fiberglass UFO-shaped pods has no obvious alternative use. Once the resort concept failed, the form itself became an obstacle to any other practical application. Even in ruin, the UFO houses succeeded in one way. They became unforgettable. Their distinctive look and the mystery around their abandonment kept them in the public consciousness for decades. Today they are gone physically, but they live on in photographs, online forums, and the stories told by those who remember walking among the empty shells by the sea. In Mumbai, Antilia stands as one of the most expensive private homes ever built. Rising 27 stories above Altamount Road, the tower is the residence of billionaire Mukesh Ambani and his family. Its design combines glass, steel, and garden terraces in a layered vertical form. The building includes 3 helipads, multiple swimming pools, a ballroom, a movie theater, a snow room that can produce artificial snow, and living quarters for a full-time staff, reportedly numbering in the hundreds. The total floor space is far larger than most commercial office buildings in the city. Its location, in a city where many live in dense and modest housing, has sparked debate. Supporters point to the jobs created during construction and the ongoing maintenance. Critics question the scale and symbolism of such an opulent home in a place with stark economic contrasts. In either case, Antilia has become a landmark, photographed and written about far beyond Mumbai, its scale and cost, making it a symbol of wealth and ambition. In New Delhi, the Lotus Temple is one of the most visited buildings in India. Completed in 1986, it serves as a Baha'i house of worship and is shaped like a lotus flower, a symbol with deep cultural and spiritual meaning in the region. Its 27 freestanding marble petals curve outward, creating 9 entrances to a central hall. The design emphasizes light, symmetry, and a sense of openness, and the original marble surface gave the building a bright, almost glowing presence against the sky. Over time, however, the temple needed renovation to address weathering and wear. During one phase of work, material choices led to a noticeable change in appearance. The bright white marble developed patchy yellow discoloration, altering the temple's visual impact. Engineers and architects traced the problem to pollutants and the new surface treatments interacting with the environment. For visitors familiar with the temple's original look, the change was striking and disappointing. While the structure's symbolic form remained, its altered appearance became a cautionary example of how renovation, if not managed with care, can undermine the qualities that made a building iconic. In Houston, Texas, the Beer Can House tells a different story about scale and excess. Unlike Antilia or the Lotus Temple, it was not built by a team of architects or with a vast budget. It was the decades-long work of a single man, John Milkovich. In the late 1960s, Milkovich, a retired upholsterer, began covering his house with flattened beer cans. He started with the siding, then moved on to the fence, garage, and yard decorations. The cans were cleaned, cut, and nailed in overlapping rows, creating a metallic skin that reflected sunlight and weathered over time. He added beer pull tabs as curtains, aluminum siding made from can strips, and even used bottle caps for decorative patterns in the yard. The project continued for years, and by the time Milkovich stopped, the house was almost completely covered. Neighbors and passersby reacted with curiosity, amusement, and sometimes confusion. For Milkovich, the work was part hobby, part recycling project, and part personal expression. Today, the Beer Can House is preserved as a piece of folk art and is open to visitors. It represents a form of excess driven not by wealth, but by persistence and personal vision. These 3 examples, Antilia, the Lotus Temple renovation, and the Beer Can House, show different ways excess can turn a building into a landmark. In Mumbai, the scale of Antilia is its defining feature. Its height, amenities, and price tag make it impossible to ignore, and its cultural impact comes from the contrast between its luxury and the surrounding city. In New Delhi, the Lotus Temple's excess was originally in its beauty and craftsmanship, but the renovation mishap shifted attention to how easily those qualities can be compromised. In Houston, the excess lies in the sheer volume of cans and the years of labor put into attaching them, turning a private home into a public curiosity. In each case, the excess is tied to the building's identity. Antilia would still be a large house without its multiple helipads and snow room, but those features push it into global awareness. The Lotus Temple would still be a place of worship without pristine marble, but its immaculate petals were part of its draw, and their discoloration made headlines. The beer can house could have been an ordinary home, but the thousands of cans transformed it into something entirely unique. Money, mistake, and obsession each play a role. Antilia's prominence comes from the resources invested in making it the ultimate urban residence. The Lotus Temple's altered appearance came from a renovation decision that did not anticipate environmental effects. The beer can house emerged from a long-term personal project that turned into a local landmark. None of these buildings was designed to be anonymous, and each ended up with a reputation that extended beyond its intended function. The line between a notable building and a landmark is often crossed when a project exceeds expectations, whether in scale, cost, detail, or narrative. For Antilia, the scale was deliberate, an expression of its owner's position and vision. For the Lotus Temple, the shift came when a flaw in execution changed how people experienced it. For the beer can house, the transformation was gradual, the result of persistence rather than planning. In all three, the excess, whether measured in resources, ambition, or time, has become inseparable from the story of the building itself.